Premier, I'm glad that you allowed us to rewrite the story. And I think that perhaps the original author made a mistake. He should have put Goldilocks in the story. Thank you so much. Again, as always, challenging. And UWC is attempting to rise to that challenge. We're looking for, Derek Keats, how many millions are we looking for an ICT building? And for a chair. So we have big thoughts in that direction, and we hope to be successful. I say that not just incidentally, but you are the Premier of the province. And the interesting thing about all three speakers so far, it's O'Connell, Rasool, and now Duncan Hindle, is that we've had similar sorts of histories. All of us have been chased and beaten up, and all of that part of it, and all of us then found our way into government, into a more formal relationship with our people, and all of us were surprised about how different that was. I remember the first day a march came to me as head of education after I'd led the march a few months earlier was quite a shock. But we've settled into those roles now, and Duncan Hindle has been an academic, he's been a trade unionist, and now he's the DG of Education of our country, and we ask him to speak to us on behalf of the Minister. Thanks.
You've had the academic, you've had the politician, now you get the bureaucrat, yeah? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, Chairperson, Professor Keats, the Rector of UWC, Professor O'Connell, Premier Rasool, distinguished guests, particularly those not from South Africa who are joining us here, but from South Africa as well, ladies and gentlemen. It certainly gives me firstly, regret that I have to apologize for both the Minister and the Deputy Minister who had been invited and certainly would have liked to have been here. I do bring apologies from them. But let me say, I'm rather glad that they did have to apologize, because it's given me the opportunity to be here today, and it really is a pleasure for me to speak at this conference. Although, let me say, I likewise, like some of the other speakers, do so with some trepidation. This is not a field in which I can claim any expertise at all. I'm certainly here to learn, and perhaps the first lesson we draw from that is that the people we learn from, older people like myself, are in fact half our age outside, it certainly turns, I think, some of the traditional power relations on its head straight away. And perhaps that's part of what we have to explore during the course of this conference, how the new age is affecting relations within society more broadly. But I do want to compliment, firstly, the university. I think this particular topic chosen for the conference builds on the extraordinary history that this particular university has had, and probably enters now a new phase of struggle for the university in different ways. Perhaps one of the differences this time, Professor O'Connell, you have some wealthy and influential friends on your side, which we might not have had in the past, but clearly a very important and critical issue that is being discussed. And one that I'm sure does have a high degree of continuity with many of the pre-1994 struggles. The difference, of course, is this now is taken into a world where the currencies of the world today are information, are knowledge, and those sort of areas. But the principle hasn't changed. We're still focused on the protection, the advancement of human rights, particularly those rights entrenched in our Constitution. We're looking, in a sense, at how those rights are affected by this new world, and hopefully ensuring that the rights of both the individual, the rights of society, are not eroded by or in this digital age, where I think we can recognize that information is so easily obtained, stored, analyzed, and potentially, I suppose, used in different ways should people wish to do so. So one of the tasks, of course, is to continue to protect the individual in society, protecting them also from what has been described as the unintended consequences of mixing the law and technology. I was rather intrigued by a little story in the media this morning about a Japanese woman who had been charged with indecency. She had been running what was known as a nude chat room. It seemed that this wasn't appropriate, but when the judges looked into the law, they found that the laws and indecency had no provision around chat rooms at all, and she was then released. So it's one of those situations, presumably the law having to try and keep up with developments in technology, but it's important that we watch how those things happen. I would believe, and I'm sure it does happen, that digital freedom certainly provides us with extraordinary opportunities to leverage the kind of rights that we have established in society, the rights that we've fought for so many years, and to use them, obviously, for the development of our society. I had the privilege 2 days ago of being in a very different part of the country, Bushbuck Ridge in Mpumalanga, and had the honor there of joining our President Mbeki at Maripe Secondary School in Bushbuck Ridge. This is one of 6 South African schools that have been chosen to be part of a NEPAD e-schools demo project. Essentially, what's happening in South Africa and 37 other countries across the continent is each of them have indicated a wish to participate in the e-schools project. 6 schools in each country have been selected, and these have been supported by the large computer suppliers, Oracle, HP, etc., Cisco, and they've each then taken ownership, as it were, of a school and provided the school with both the computers and the connectivity required. And this, of course, was a very extraordinary situation because it's a highly rural area, a very depressed but a highly populated area, and a very exciting project done under the umbrella broadly of the NEPAD Commission on ICTs, which is trying to facilitate a collective approach towards ICT development across the continent, and in particular focusing on 2 elements. One is the provision of bandwidth. You might know that one of the NEPAD projects is in fact an undersea cable along the east coast of Africa that it is hoped will dramatically increase our bandwidth availability, but also dramatically reduce the costs of that connectivity. But also NEPAD is working on issues of bulk buying of equipment and those sort of things that should make it easier for most African countries to come on board this ICT revolution. But what is most interesting is the President, in addressing the school and community, because these things are seen very much as a community initiative, he put aside his prepared speech in the way, Premier, that politicians are able to do after officials have battled for long hours to prepare the speech. They then put it to one side and decide to talk off the cuff. But when you're President and Premier, you're allowed to do that. The President reflected on, in driving to Mpumalanga, how beautiful and green that part of the country was, and he was contrasting it against the, at this stage, rather dry brown Gauteng that he had left. And he noted, he said, our dependence to a large extent in this country on nature, and the fact that in Mpumalanga here it was green and we were able to grow, we weren't able to do it in Gauteng, and on the rain, which is a significant part of survival in those areas. And the point he was making is that with the provision now of this computer laboratory at Maripe High School, he said we need to now make the shift in this country, and certainly in the school it has to happen. He said from a dependence on rain to a dependence on the brain. And really that's the shift that this country overall, economically, socially, culturally, politically, has to make. How do we depend more on the brain, on its use, intelligence, information, knowledge, etc., from perhaps the more practical economies that are rain dependent, subsistence agriculture, etc., and the real hope that he put there, that the children of Maripe, as well as the broader community of Maripe, would really be able to move qualitatively from where they were now into a new kind of economy. Digital freedom offers us, obviously, open source software, as well as various forms of open content and knowledge resources like Wikipedia, open standards, etc. But one of the things that I think is profound for me in this particular shift is what we probably should note as being the cultural shifts that take place. Many of us, perhaps of my generation, would have grown up very strongly reminded that there's no such thing as a free lunch. Anything you get for free, ultimately, there's a price to pay later on. Well, I'm happy to say that so far there doesn't seem to be a price to be paid for open source software. It does indeed seem to be genuinely a free lunch, and that's a major shift, I think, for many people who may remain cynical about these things, continually waiting, but when is the account coming? When is the crunch going to it? When am I going to see the consequences of this free lunch? And sometimes quite surprised to find that it doesn't, in fact, materialize. The second cultural shift I note, and again, it might be a personal reflection, but it's one that perhaps, again, for us growing up, where issues of personal security, personal privacy were critically important elements, and many people still retain that. I know in the UK, I think they still battle enormously to try and get people to accept the idea of identity cards and identity numbers. An historical, probably liberal tradition that you didn't give out this kind of information. You kept it to yourself, and other people only got it perhaps under some sort of duress. Now, one notes, of course, the extraordinary change that has taken place nowadays, where younger people, and I include Premier Rasool there now, are quite willing to go there and put up his blog on the computer, share all his deepest and most private thoughts with the world out there. And of course others using things like MySpace. The way in which people are so comfortable now in putting up photos of themselves, information about themselves, their thoughts, whatever else it might be, up into that open space. It's called MySpace, but I'm not sure that it's mine in any way. It's pretty well a public space out there. And I think they're fascinating shifts that have taken place around us, and I think it's an important element that we need to keep in mind, particularly when we enter these debates and we come perhaps with these prejudices and preconceptions that we might have about these kind of issues. I'm very pleased to record that on behalf of government, firstly, that government itself in February this year has adopted a free and open source software policy, a policy that certainly encourages the use of free and open software, open source software, but recognizing, of course, that this won't be an exclusive option. The President, you might know, on an annual basis gets together with the world leaders in the IT field under the Presidential International Advisory Committee, PIAC, and their advice, and I think it's been one that has been followed, I think is captured when the President says, in building the African Information Society, we must continue to use both proprietary and open source software. He talks about the need to foster collaborative development, interoperative platforms, as well as the use of free and open source software. So government, I think, has taken a major stride towards free and open source software, but again, perhaps with some of that caution in terms of moving into it, moves into it in a way with a parallel track with proprietary software, but I think an important statement that it's made in adopting that policy earlier this year. In education, we similarly have got guidelines for the use of free and open source software in schools. It's not yet a policy position that we advocate the use of free and open source, so the guidelines are really meant to say if you choose to use it, these are the kind of things you need to know, but presumably following on the broader government declaration, we will have to relook at our guidelines which were published prior to those and see whether perhaps we don't take a slightly stronger stand on some of these matters, although recognizing that at present we do have an agreement with Microsoft who provides free software to all our schools. We recognize, I'm sure, the dangers of that vendor lock-in that can occur, but in all honesty at this stage, it's an offer that I don't think we could have turned down, but maybe in the near future we'd have to look at the other options as well. Certainly within education, a very strong commitment we have to ICTs at all levels of the system. One that we're constantly reminded and probably underexploiting is the use of ICTs for very basic literacy and numeracy training of adults. Many countries in the world have very successfully used ICTs in that field. We know, of course, their value at school. We know, of course, their necessity perhaps at higher education, but certainly, as I say, throughout the system, we recognize the need. In our schools, we are committed to ensuring that by 2013, no child will leave school without having become computer literate at least, and I have to say perhaps that target is not as ambitious as we should have it. The President has recently urged us to be more audacious in our thinking, and probably in that area at least we need to be doing so indeed. We have a few initiatives within education. One of them is a dedicated education network, EduNet, which is currently in existence in the country. It does connect all schools. It enables schools to get connectivity. We have recently had finally some progress with Telkom, who now do give a discount to schools for connectivity work, and that has certainly facilitated ICT connection in some way. And we've recently agreed that all teachers, as part of their initial training, should indeed have computer training before they emerge as teachers. So those are critical elements. But probably the biggest one, the most exciting for us in the department, is the establishment of the education portal, known as Tutong, which I hope some of you might have seen. This portal, I'm told, is over 22,000 learning objects, all linked in some way to the national curriculum statement, and they are very strongly used by both teachers and learners. And really this, I think, is the first sustained opportunity we've had to pull together the online education experience for South African education communities. The portal gives access to a wide range of quality materials. It also assists school administrators. There's a school administration content in there as well as various other resources and documents, policy documents of the department that we put there, and general news and information related to education. This is a free service to our schools, and particular priority is given to our disadvantaged schools, particularly in the rural areas. This year, for the first time, we're now piloting, thankfully with support from the Shuttleworth Foundation, the provision of open content on the portal, and this will also be in support of our national curriculum statement. And while the school system is being prepared in that way, I think we recognize that universities more and more, and perhaps not universally so, but more and more, are starting to develop certainly the technologies, the creative minds, and indeed the potential to take advantage of these digital freedoms that are now occurring. Professor Keats, I believe, claims that the combination of digital freedom, social networking, and digital initiatives is indeed set to change higher education forever into what he calls Education 3.0, new educational landscape. I would hope in some ways that doesn't just get limited to higher education, but that we do reconceptualize the entire education project in relation to what is available to us now in terms of information technologies. We need to, however, recognize that our attempts to roll out ICT into our education system are constrained by the fact that many schools in our country still lack clean water. They lack adequate sanitation. If you can imagine going to a school that doesn't even have toilets, you can start to understand the complexities. And of course, many schools that don't even have electricity at this stage, where computers are still a distant dream. The figures I have is that only 30% of our schools currently use computers for teaching and learning purposes. Many more do use for admin purposes, but only 30% use them for teaching and learning. And regrettably, only 2% of our schools nationally have ICT connections. So the kind of context that Premier Rasool is talking about is one that is particular to the Western Cape, which together with Gauteng is obviously leading the way in ICT provision. But we need to recognize that across the country, there are still enormous challenges in just providing basic infrastructure, so that any kind of rollout of ICT has to occur alongside the provision of these basic education infrastructure, which is still a necessity, of course, and for those schools, the debate about open source or not has not yet even commenced. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude by saying that we're enormously encouraged by what's happening at UWC here today. I think it very much has taken, as part of its mission, a need for very deep intellectual engagement with what it means ultimately to be a democracy now in this digital age. We've got ourselves to a democracy. We need to understand what it is that means. I want to wish you success for the deliberations. I look forward certainly to your recommendations. I trust that they will indeed be audacious. I would expect nothing less from a group like this, certainly looking at some of the members of the Expo outside. And perhaps I'll make one further call, and that's to invite all of you here to assist in whatever way you can in ensuring that these recommendations are carried out. In many cases, it's not the will that is lacking. It's not even in many cases the finances, the resources that are lacking. What we lack most of all is the people power, the skill, the expertise to make these things happen. And certainly if there are people in this room who have something to contribute, I certainly hope they can in ensuring that we as government are able to effectively implement the kind of things that you people believe we should be doing. Thank you very much and good luck.